Guys.
Welcome to Shiny Side Out number 61 with
Dave
and Mackie. And we are coming to you live from the Freedom Slip Sydney studios as one piece of the information super puzzle on Revolution Radio and, on freedomslips.com. You can talk to us in the chat room while we're on the air. That's pretty cool. Follow us on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook to get updates between shows, and check out shinysideout.net for our show archives, show notes, and links we paste into the chat during the show. It's interactive. Get one of these apps for your smart device. So there's Revolution Radio, TalkStream Live, and TuneIn.com. You can also purchase a Grace Tabletop Radio. Or what we prefer you to do is to go to www.freedomslips.com and jump into the chat, which is live now. The number to call in if you are in the United States of America is 347-688-2902, or via Skype you can add Freedom Screen. Dave, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How you doing?
Not bad. That was quite a mouthful in the intro, wasn't it?
I changed it after 60 shows. I've changed it again.
I like it. Well done. And guys, seriously, get those apps if you can. Visit freedomslips.com and visit shinysideout.net if you can. Look, how's your week been, man?
You know what? Actually, it's been pretty good. A lot of personal successes at work, which are always good.
Nice.
They make your life better, but I'm working back to working at night time at work again. I can't help it. I surrender myself to the company that pays me nothing. So, what on earth are you going to do with your life otherwise? And I have to say, this week has been completely saturated with reading today's show notes.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
No, hey, you know what? Don't ever apologize. You put the best show notes I've ever experienced together.
And since they're the only show notes you've ever experienced, thank you.
Well, they are the best. What can I say?
Thank you. No, it's guys. I don't want to give the wrong impression here. It's a collaboration between Dave and I. So don't think this is all growing on my own dung heap. This is a collaborative dung heap. Okay. So this is Dave and I in unison. Trying to bring you information that hopefully you don't know.
That's right. Now today is show number 61. Mackie, it's still every single time that number increases by one, it still gets me every week.
Oh, look, I feel the same way, and we started this well over a year ago now, and while Dave has held the fort down a number of times without me, I've been traveling, unfortunately, or fortunately. I have to say, it's an astonishing thing, and then I've got all the show notes on my desktop, right? All the files, and then I look at the shinysideout.net website. Over time, it becomes an impressive body of work, Dave. It really does.
I'm now referring to it to my friends. And you know what? I said, I was talking to someone the other day, and they were talking about something. I said, yeah, that's really interesting, because when I interviewed blah, 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 and they went, what? Yeah. You interviewed him? And I didn't even go down the whole radio show thing. I just said, you know what? Yeah, I did. You just check it out. Google his name and my name on YouTube, and there you go.
That's it.
And they went, wow, really? I said, yeah, I can tell you everything they said. I know their point of view, what their slant was for whatever it was. And you know what? I thought we were an authority before, Mickey, but I keep learning stuff every week.
Same. Look, and this is the amazing thing. As we do the research for these shows, or as we interview people, these are amazing interviewees that we get, and we're very lucky and awesome, Dave, for getting them on board. And we learn a lot. And Dave and I, between us, have probably researched this for 60 years. Seriously researching, because we don't really have too many other hobbies. We're just a little sad that way. But you learn something every week, and today is no different. There's certain things we thought we'd bring you in comparative mythology because we think it's an interesting topic, and then we find these amazing resources online and in libraries as well, and the coincidences or otherwise that seem to just build are just too much to take, and you're just astonished at the breadth of knowledge that's available out there, and just how much correlation exists between items, right?
Yeah. The thing that really got me with today's topic was literally how many places around the world have the same the same stories.
The same, right? Yeah.
They're exactly the same. They're only said differently because of the people, the vocabulary, and their environment, what they've been brought up with. But if it was us standing at each one of these locations that we're going to get to, and by the way, guys, I think this might be a multiple part show.
Yeah.
If you and I, Meki, and our listeners were to stand collectively in a group at each one of these locations while these events happened, I think we would describe them completely the same. I don't think there would be anything else.
Agreed, 100%.
Oh my goodness. So while I was looking at this, we talk about tips of the iceberg all the time.
Yeah.
One of the tips of the iceberg for this one was simply what kind of things around the world are the same in the ancient tales. That's the premise from
Yep.
when we started looking this one up. I found, and look, we can't do it in today's or the next week or the weekend after that show. I'm gonna continue the research and find out a little bit more about it. But just to give you guys a heads up, and then we'll move on to the show. Even the I'm gonna just say it out loud. This is weaponized radio. This is the segue. It's a terrible segue, but that the ancient gods' weapons from around the world, the weapons that the gods were said to have held in their hands, and not only the actual weapon shape, but the resulting destruction from the weapon, are said to be the same. Think about that. These aren't. What was the term you used a bit earlier? How two different locations can have their stories, messed with or intermingled. Happenstance, yeah,
cross-cultural contamination. But and we sorry, this is something we discussed just prior to the show. Now there's certainly that, but some of the detail and some of the differences, in fact, lend credence to the theory that, in fact, they are separately evolved mythologies. I mean, sure, there's other stuff, but what Dave is referring to here is, of course, cultures come in contact with each other, and certainly in the last 100 years, 200, 300 years, whatever, even a little longer, there has been a lot of Christian influences around the world, a lot of Muslim influences around the world, and cultures tend to, I guess, blend into each other. But some of these mythologies, they're just too distinct, and they actually predate let's call it the cultural cross-contamination.
Yeah, that was one of the things that really was a standout about this stuff. So I'm going to say, sit back, strap yourselves in, and Neki has some advice about something personal.
Adjust your individual reality monitors and suspend all disbelief, as we always ask you when we enter the tinfoil head zone.
Absolutely. Now ride with us on this roller coaster of today's show. I don't want to talk about any news or anything else. I think we've done enough because we've got a lot of content to get through, and what you guys are used to, what you miss out when Meki's not here. Guess what? It's all here today, and it's going to make up for it all.
I don't think any making up is necessary. Dave has been doing a fantastic job while I wasn't here. So, and then make no mistake, last week I was here, and Dave did a bang-up job with the interview. And hey Dave, that was a brilliant interview, I thought.
Hey, guess what? I've got Clifford Stone.
Nice.
Yeah, so nice. I'll be interviewing him. He actually put a submission through. I sent Meki the documents that he sent me. He put his own submission to the government. He didn't think that the citizens' hearing was enough. No, what? Wow. Yeah. This guy's awesome. So it's going to be a great interview. Looking forward. It'll be up in the next few weeks. Okay, guys?
Fantastic. And then, sorry, just before we go on, there's a couple more interview news potentially. Giorgio, right?
Yes, absolutely. Giorgio A. Tsoukalos, the hair, he's coming back. And nice. We also have Jose Escamilla once again coming back on air.
Nice. It'd be great to talk to him.
We like return viewers.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Interviewees, yeah. It'd be great to talk to him to see how his documentary was
Celestial went down, yep.
Yeah.
It's now turned to purely DVD, by the way.
Okay.
So if you want to see it, please buy it. It really is something else. It's one of those things for your shelves to show your children.
Yeah, it was. Even if you don't believe any of this, the visuals in it are mesmerizing. So just from an aesthetic point of view, it's good to buy and just have a look at it. You will appreciate it from an art angle because the renderings, the color is just fantastic. And thank you very much, Jose, for producing that, and we'll speak to you soon.
Hey, Meki,
yep.
this is being show 61,
Mm.
and this is today's show is about comparative mythology. I'm going to ask you, what is comparative mythology?
Well, Dave, I'm glad you asked. Comparative mythology was defined by Scott Littleton, who was an anthropologist, as the systematic comparison of myths and mythic themes drawn from a wide variety of cultures. So essentially, it really is exactly what it sounds like. So you've got a whole bunch of myths all around the world, different cultures, and by comparing them, the scholars try to identify underlying similarities and/or they're trying to reconstruct a protomythology from which those mythologies developed. So protomythology is a mythology that is a forerunner to all other mythologies. If you find the same things in the field of linguistics, where they look for a proto-language, and there was an interesting news item where, in fact, seven words are exactly the same across most of Eurasia. Okay, and the one that is the most common is the word thou or du, which means you, and that goes right into Mongolia and into Sanskrit and Siberia and so forth. So that's what proto means. Just one that was there as the original in a way. Comparative approaches to mythology held great popularity among 18th and 19th century scholars for obvious reasons. That's when the West, and this is a very West-centric kind of view, opened up to the world and started to discover the Far East, India, China, even the Americas. People started to realize, hey, hang on, these people had cultures too. Before that, during the colonial times, of let's call it the 14th, 15th, 16th, even 17th century, it was a lot more jingoistic. It was a lot more chauvinistic. Well, not so much chauvinistic, I guess that's the wrong word, but certainly more bigoted. A bigoted worldview where the West, the Europeans were seen to bring culture to every part of the globe. In the 18th and 19th century, I think the realization started to set in that, in fact, whoa, hang on, these guys have something to say as well. And their cultures are, in fact, a lot older than ours. And they seem to remember a lot more than us, the Vedas and the Popol Vuh of the Mayans and the Chinese mythologies and so forth. Now, many of the scholars back then believed that all myths showed signs of having evolved from a single myth or a mythical theme. And we've discussed this, Dave, before, where people in the 18th and 19th century seem to be more open-minded to certain things. Certainly when we looked at ancient artifacts in archaeology, right? They found them and they could accept that they're very, very old. These days, we don't seem to have that same kind of open-mindedness.
Oh no, we're completely skeptical about everything now.
Yeah, and which is interesting. Now, this is where the contrast is. Modern day scholars lean more towards particularism, which means they're feeling suspicious of broad statements about myths. So they focus. It's almost like a blinkered view of mythology, if you will. They tend to, they refer to myths that they maintain certain similarities, and the similarities are deciphered by comparative mythologists as vague and superficial. Now, Dave and I have set out in this show to disprove that to a point. So modern people modern mythologists, study types, anthropologists and whatnot, essentially say, no, look, there aren't any proto-myths and all myths are, pretty much self-evolved. They just happen to evolve in the area of the world they were in. And that there's also a whole psychological approach to archetypes and whatnot, which we go into later. One exception, though, to this particular trend is Joseph Campbell's theory of the monomyth, which we will discuss later as well. And another recent exception is the historical approach followed by E.J. Michael Witzel in his reconstruction of many subsequent layers of older mythologies. And you can actually find a lot of this information on the net, and we've put all the links into the show notes, and we are pasting them into the chat as we speak. Now,
wait. Now, there is one other that's surfaced recently also, which was the Sumerian text or the tablets and the Bible. The theologians are now looking at both of these and suggesting they're describing the same tale as we've told before in previous shows. as being they're a previous event. They're both describing a previous event. That means both of these stories are right. They have to be right. They're both talking about the same thing.
Yes.
So that is where it surprised me, I have to say, greatly, that they've actually taken that step forward rather than saying, no, that one's all theory, the Bible's real. They could have done that. They chose not to.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely correct. And I think we will see a lot more of this particular, realization as we go forward and as these things are being studied. And a lot more of these things will be admitted to because, very simply, it's too obvious. And specifically when it comes to Bible mythology in comparison to ancient Sumerian, Babylonian texts, Egyptian texts, you can see the parallels. You can say that one came before the other, and you can see that both may have come from the same source at some point.
Mm-hmm. And it is very easy for these people who are getting grants and may have their grant dismissed to ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
It's too easy for them to do that.
Yep.
In fact, then that's the easy road. They just choose to say, you know what, well, that can't be true because, I know it was written 3,600 years ago. It doesn't really matter. This thing over here, which I'm studying, or I'm really concentrating hard on, the other stuff can disappear. And they choose to do that.
Yes, absolutely. And I've said this before and I say it again. I like open-minded scientists. I believe the scientific method should be followed at all times, even if it contradicts the existing paradigm. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's just a very simple point of view. Very simple-minded kind of guy I am. You've got a hypothesis. You try to prove it, come up with a theorem, and you do the experiments, you do the observation, and wherever the data leads you, not your opinion and not your preferred opinion and not what you would like to be true, but the data,
Mm-hmm.
wherever the data leads you is where you should go. Okay, any field, anywhere, even in the soft sciences, the social sciences as we call them.
But just for instance, if you had a CEO of a company, you might like this one. You had a CEO of a company whose accountant was saying that the company wasn't doing very well and showing graphs to support the data, but the CEO, in fact, after being presented with all the evidence, said, no, we're doing fantastically.
Yes, really? Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're doing really well. Oh, okay, then it must be okay. Which is what happened with Enron.
Yeah, look what happened to them, guys. So, and all their billions of dollars worth of, payments out to their executive. The most important thing that the take home from what we're going to talk about, and as we're talking about today, is, be open-minded. Take this stuff in. You listen to what we've what we've discovered, and what our research has taken us to. I want to see you in the chat room telling me about, wow, I didn't know that was true, or is it really?
Tell us we're wrong. If we're wrong, we will correct on the air. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so look, there are several approaches to comparative mythology to jump right in, and comparative mythologists, just by the very nature of what this field of study is, come from a number of different disciplines, right? There's folklore, there's anthropology, history, linguistics, religious studies, and so forth. And they have a variety of methods to compare myths, and all of them, of course, have their own methods, okay? And we're going to go through a couple of them so you understand which approach scholars have taken over the years. So the first, and probably, the most common, apart from content, would be linguistics. So some scholars looked at the linguistic relationships between the myths of different cultures. For example, the similarities between the names of gods in different cultures, the actual names. One particularly successful example of this approach is the study of Indo-European mythology. Scholars here have found striking similarities between the mythological and religious terms used in different cultures of Europe and India. Maybe not a big surprise. For example, the Greek sky god Zeus, Pater, Zeus, Father Zeus, the Roman sky god Jupiter, and the Indian Vedic sky god Dias Peter have linguistically identical names. Now, this suggests that the Greeks, Romans, and Indians originated from a common ancestral culture, and that the names Zeus, Jupiter, and Dios, and the Germanic Tiu, which actually the English Tuesday comes from, evolved from an older name, Dies Fater, which referred to the sky god. Or, to give a perfect English cognate, which is the corresponding word, the day father in a Proto-Indo-European religion. Now, the stretch between Greeks and Romans is probably not so great for most, but between Indians, Germans or Germanic people and Greeks is probably more of a surprise. So you can see that one of the approaches in linguistics is actually quite successful. As I mentioned earlier, there's some words across Europe, Asia, or Eurasia, down into North Africa, have remained the same for thousands of years.
Now,
Dave,
if it was a little difficult to hear the likeness between those words.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to slow down just for 1 sec on this one, because this is really important. When I read this one, I actually saw this online and in my research with this one as well, which was the Greek guy, the sky god Zeus. He was the father of all of the Greek gods. He was above them all in hierarchy. And below him he had Poseidon and, what was the other one? And Thor. Okay, so Pater it's Zeus Pater. And the sky god Jupiter, and it still contains that, this is linguistically, contains the Peter word in it.
Yeah, and this z.
Yeah, well that's right. And the deus Peter as well.
Yep.
Each one of those have the same thing, and we want you to understand just how close these names really are between each other, though they're geographically separated by a long distance. So from linguistics, or the origin of the language, it can be determined exactly the way he said it. Right, Mackie, you're absolutely 100% right on this one. I can see it. We can all see it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And look, it'll be in the show notes, and you will be able to see it as well, unless you do your own research beforehand. The next component, Dave, is structural. Why don't you take us through the structural approach to comparative mythology?
Some scholars, you know what this means, some scholars look for underlying structures shared by different myths. So you have the folklorist, Vladimir Krop, proposed that many Russian fairy tales have a common plot structure, in which certain events happen in a predictable order. So in contrast, the anthropologist Claude Levi-Strauss, examined the structure of a myth in terms of the abstract relationships between its elements, rather than the plot order. So in particular, Levi-Strauss believed that the elements of a myth could be organized into binary oppositions, raw versus cooked, nature versus culture, and etc. He thought that the myth's purpose was to mediate these oppositions, thereby resolving tensions and contradictions found in human life or culture.
That's very interesting. So mythologies are structured in similar ways. Now, I guess since we're all human beings, that makes sense. But if we could see that the structure is more or less rigid in its approach, then because you can have many different structures, and human beings are different in their approaches, that would also lead to the conclusion that these stories were told maybe from an older source, which adhered to a certain way of telling things potentially.
Yeah, so it's basically that really it could be classified by the rate of change in the myth. You'd be able to understand it structurally by how much degree of change there was in the story.
That's what that reminds me of, Dave. It's mitochondrial DNA, or even a normal DNA, when studies are done to see how far removed you are from the original.
Exactly.
And it's usually done by mutations. And you're right, Dave. In stories, I guess the same kind of mutation should occur that could be tracked back, right?
The only times that what can adhere a story is if it's a ritual or it's sung. They will prolong the structure of a sentence for a far greater length of time.
Yes.
So think about that, guys, when you're listening to, he was looking at fairy tales.
Yes. And maybe we should, I want to make this quick point since we're talking about the structure and fairy tales here. The German scholars, if you will, take fairy tales very, very seriously. In Germany, there's a degree that you can take up at university, which teaches on how to properly study fairy tales, the Brothers Grimm and whatnot. So it's taken very, very seriously. It's not dismissed as a children's tale, but it's taken seriously to the fact that it may convey some very important cultural information and other information, for that matter, over time, because these these fairy tales, if you will, weren't written down until fairly recently. Okay, these are usually things that were told from from the elder to the younger, and just word of mouth, if you want, and same with the ancient poems and epics. So it's just to let you know, I mean, the transmission, the medium of transmission in the olden days, and we've spoken about this, Dave, was verbal. And people used to remember really well. And you're right, when people incant or sing, there's a certain meter they keep, and that's what ensures that the tale doesn't change too much.
Exactly. Now, the same thing could be said about the children's nursery rhymes.
Yeah, like the one, the favorite. Come on, do the one.
Ring a rosy, a pocket full of posies, a tissue, we all fall down. That's the plague.
Yes.
That's absolutely the story of the plague. That's it in a children's nursery rhyme.
100%.
And that, like you said, the metering keeps it intact.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at the ancient tales from Arabian Nights, flying carpets, open sesame, and the cave door opens, and all these wonderful things, which transmit potentially a highly sophisticated technology. But enough on that, because that's a whole different show on its own. The next approach that scholars take is the psychological approach. Some scholars propose that myths from different cultures reveal the same or similar psychological forces at work in those cultures. And of course, we had to bring Freud in. So some Freudian thinkers have identified stories similar to the Greek story of Oedipus in many different cultures. They argue that these stories reflect the different expressions of the Oedipus complex in those cultures. Now, for those of you that might not have studied Freud, and I did, believe it or not, the Oedipus complex is essentially based on the mythological tale of Oedipus, who was born to a king and his queen, but a soothsayer said that this son would kill the father and marry the mother. So the king, horrified, gave the son away. Sorry, wanted to have him killed, but his servant took pity and gave him away to someone else, and he was raised in another country, rose to prominence all on his own, declared war, or was caught in a war with his father's nation, and actually killed his father in battle, not knowing that's his father, and then took his mother to bed, not knowing that it was his mother. And the Oedipus complex apparently says, according to Freud, that we all have the latent want, if you're a man, to kill your father and wanting to have relations with your mother. Now, you can make of that what you will, but that's what the Oedipus complex is. Now, I'd like to say that this may or may not be true. I certainly have never had those urges or feelings. And we always must remember that Freud had a very limited sample group. He had Viennese, usually Viennese Jewish women of the late 19th, early 20th century. And that was a sample group for most of his theories. Okay, so you've got to take his theories with a grain of salt. Nonetheless, the story of Oedipus is prevalent amongst different cultures, which may lead to the conclusion either one, yes, we have this deep psychological problem, or that in fact it is based on an older story which had these elements in it. Likewise, Jungians, Jung was a student of Freud, and later on they parted ways, have identified images, themes, and patterns that appear in the myths of many different cultures. They believe that these similarities result from archetypes present in the unconscious level of every person's mind. Now, we mentioned archetypes in our introduction. An archetype is something like a father god, or the warrior poet, or like essentially things that may be anchored deep within our psyche and could thus explain, potentially, the occurrence of these characters, archetypes, throughout these stories from ancient times. Now, these are fairly reasonable theories, right? Again, I don't think necessarily that each human being, and certainly culturally, we don't seem to share the same psychology. I mean, I just point out here that the Japanese, for instance, have a very different attitude, mentality, and psychology to modern day Americans. Okay, and that difference, while there are similarities as well, of course, but this difference is very pronounced the further you go back in time because of geographical I guess distance, and travel in those days wasn't as easy. Now, you could argue that all human beings have the same exact psyche, and you would be wrong. They don't, and there's a certain cultural influence which forms our subconscious or even the unconscious mind of every a child on this planet. So certain features are inherited, other things I think are formed by the environment and the cultural influences that act upon that child. Now, Dave, the next one is
Yeah, there's another approach that they take when they're comparing the different myths, and this is the historical and comparative style. It's a new approach, though, which is both historical and comparative, hence the name. It's recently been proposed by E.J. Michael Witzel. He compares collections of mythologies of various cultures from Iceland and Egypt to the Mayans or the Mayas, and reconstructs increasingly older levels parallel to, but not necessarily dependent on, language familiarities or language families. The most prominent common feature is a storyline that extends from the creation of the world and of humans to their end. This feature is found in northern mythologies of Eurasia and the Americas. To coin a phrase, Laurasia, while it is missing in the southern mythologies of sub-Saharan Africa, New Guinea, and Australia, which was Gondwanaland. The latter is the older one, going back to the dispersal of Homo sapiens out of Africa some 65,000 years ago. Based on these two reconstructions, he offers some suggestions about the tales of the genetic African Eve. Close attention is paid to the largely parallel developments in archaeology, paleontology, genetics, and linguistics, which is, you can see where that's come through into his one. He also makes some suggestions about the persistence of these Stone Age myths in current religions.
that's really interesting, isn't it? And I would not necessarily disagree with this, but it does certainly point out there seems to be a separation point sometime in the ancient past when I guess the human culture, which may have been more coherent before that, and is split into two, I guess, mainstream cultural environments, right? So he thinks about 65,000 years ago. Now personally, I believe that we had quite a few of these nexus points. What do you think, Dave?
Well, do you know what? It's funny because we've grown up in Australia, and in Australia we just have the complete understanding that the Aboriginals, the native Australians, their dream time and their stories, which have always, well, we've grown up with this. This is something that we completely understand. In the Northern Hemisphere, they don't have the same similarity of the out of Africa story. But we know 40,000 years ago, roughly thereabouts, that the Aboriginals were able to make it here through land bridges, etc. We don't actually understand the exact date, but it's in their stories about they still contain, I should say, the construction of the earth or the way that the earth is formed. They still have those in their stories, and I think because they stayed here for so long untouched, or relatively untouched now, out damaged, their stories haven't been damaged as often with influences from outside of their civilization, that I think that they're some of the strongest things, and we'll get to those a bit later on. But you know what? It's why don't we listen? Why do we only take what's out there? And I'm really glad that there's people out there taking these approaches, sifting through this material, and bringing us what we're bringing you today.
Oh, absolutely, and bear in mind, we are once again standing on the shoulders of giants who have done this research, and there's a brilliant site which we probably won't be able to get to today, but which lists all the flood myths on the planet, and then. This is actually where I wanted to take this next, to the mythological parallels. So I'll give you some example, or rather a number of examples as to where we have these parallels. It has uncovered something astonishing. So there's the flood myth, okay? And the flood myth is the majority of today's show notes. So the show notes today comprise 99 A4 pages. Yeah, that's right. It's the size of a small novel.
Say it
today.
again, Mickey.
Yeah, we have 99 A4 pages of show notes today. That's why we will not be able to get through them, obviously. And the majority of that, I'd say probably 80 to, yeah, probably about 80 pages, describe the flood myths all across the world. And we've taken the time to highlight the similarities and vet them for relevance, so we can easily talk to them to you. But for now, and I don't think we can do it today, but for now, just generally speaking, cultures around the world tell stories about the Great Flood, and that's an understatement. Okay, it truly is almost every single culture that does this. Okay, and
on every landmass on the planet.
Exactly, including islands, right, which might have been separated from contact with other civilizations, and the similarities are striking. We will get into that later, but it's really astonishing. But I'll give you some examples now. In many cases, the flood leaves only one survivor or a group of survivors. Okay. For example, both the Babylonian Epic of Gilgamesh and the Hebrew Bible, which I think come from the same source anyway, tell of a global flood that wiped out humanity and of a man who served the Earth's species by taking them aboard a boat, the Ark. And then, of course, we're talking about Noah here. And similar stories of a single flood survivor appear in Hindu mythology, in Aztec mythology, in the Greek myth of Deucalion, as well as in the Quran. And the Quran, once again, would have the same source as the Hebrew Bible. Now, I know no one wants to hear this, but guess what, guys? At the end, you're all praying to the same God, so don't kill each other. Now, I came across this particular thing when I was probably 9 or 10 years old in one of the books by Charles Berlitz, and he called it Secrets of Forgotten Cultures or Mysteries of Forgotten Worlds. I'm just translating the German title into English now, and I was astonished that all these flood survivors and the stories would be so similar, and this is really to some extent what drove me along on my path to come to this point today. The next one, Dave, is the creative sacrifice, right?
That's right. There's many cultures around the world that have stories about divine figures whose death creates an essential part of reality. These myths seem especially common among cultures that grow crops, particularly tubers, which is an interesting.
So like potatoes
between them. Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, so they're the fruits they're vegetables that grow on the ground. One such myth from the Wemale people of Seram Islands, Indonesia. I'm probably mispronouncing everyone in Seram Islands or Seram Islands, whatever they are. Please don't hate me. Don't send me mail. Not like last time. Tells what they do, that the people, the myth, one such myth from that island in Indonesia tells of a miraculously conceived girl named Heinuwele.
Perfect.
Whose murdered corpse sprouts into the people's staple food crops. Wow. The Chinese myth of Pangu, the Vedic myth of Purusha, and the Norse, I don't have a speech impediment, the Norse, as it's the Nordics, myth of Ymir, all tell of a cosmic giant who is killed to create the world.
Yep.
If you are familiar with the pre-Aliens movie, the prequel, what was that called again?
Prometheus.
That seems to describe that event.
Yep.
Very well. Similar is the Christian myth of Christ, whose death refashions the world.
And don't send us hate mail, guys. We're just trying to point out similarities here, okay?
But we're talking about a very similar event. So think about the similarities. That's what we're talking about here.
Yep. So it's a sacrifice, but this sacrifice is not an end in itself. It actually leads to creation, right? Mm-hmm. That's really the point here. And the truth is this: death of Christ in this particular
context.
Context really does mean that the death of Christ has ushered in the new age of forgiveness, if you will. I mean, Christ died for our sins, for your sins. And his blood washed away your sins, and therefore it was the creation, if you accept Christ, of a world that can move into paradise. So it is a creative sacrifice as well, and this is really what all these other stories are. In fact, the blood of Ymir, the Norse giant, formed all the oceans, And in fact, he's also mentioned in the Great Flood, believe it or not. So they're all they're all connected. Yeah.
What's the dying god?
All right. Yeah. Look, the dying god is also a very common theme across a lot of mythologies. So many myths feature a god who dies and then often returns to life. Again, I don't want to take anything away from modern day religions. Such myths are particularly common in Near East mythologies. Near East being the Middle East. Israel, Turkey, Babylonia, Egypt, all that. The anthropologist Sir James Fraser compared these dying god myths in his multi-volume work, The Golden Bow, an excellent book, and you should, it's several books, you should really read it. The Egyptian god Osiris and the Mesopotamian god Tammuz are examples of the dying god, while the Greek myth of Adonis, though he was immortal, has often been compared to Osiris, and the myth of Dionysus also features such death and rebirth. So Osiris was also slain and then put together again, and interestingly enough, though, it's similar to Ganesha, the Indian elephant god, if you will, and the same piece of anatomy was missing. So Osiris, as well as Ganesha, had an anatomical defect once all their chopped up parts were put together, and it was in the nether regions that they were missing something. Their reproductive organ. Some scholars have noted similarities between polytheistic stories of dying gods and, of course, the Christian story of Jesus of Nazareth. Awareness of these similarities goes back to the early Christian era when the church father Justin Martyr discussed them. So the early Christians were very aware of the dying god and resurrection stories of other cultures. Okay, so make no mistake, there was an awareness, which now, of course, has, I guess, died away somewhat.
I have to say that's something I just did not know. We keep coming across stuff we don't know, and that's one of those things. I had no clue. I thought it was just the Christianity that had that one.
Yeah, this is the interesting. I mean, there are others which escape me now, but certainly in the Krishna, similar in Indian Hindu religion. The next one I'll take us through quickly because that's a bit of a mouthful, Dave. This is the structure of hero stories, and this is important. We spoke about Joseph Campbell, who sort of breaks away a little from the modern interpretation of mythology as being, particular rather than having one common ancestry. So a number of scholars have suggested that hero stories from various cultures have the same underlying structure. Okay, Otto Rank, who began his career as a follower of Sigmund Freud, argued that the stories of heroes' births have a common Oedipal structure. We've just discussed Oedipus, and that was his argument. That's fine. Other scholars, including Lord Raglan and more recently Joseph Campbell, have also suggested that hero stories share common structure. Some comparative mythologists look for similarities only among hero stories within a specific geographical or ethnic range. For example, the Austrian scholar Johann Georg van Haan tried to identify a common structure underlying Aryan hero stories. You can imagine in what historical framework he worked in. Others, such as Campbell, proposed theories about hero stories in general. According to Campbell's monomyth theory, which you mentioned earlier, hero stories from around the world share a common plot structure. Hero stories from around the world share a common plot structure. Because of its extremely comparative nature, the monomyth theory is currently out of favor with the mainstream study of mythology. Yeah, it makes sense, because it's probably too confronting. Joseph Campbell's monomyth, or the hero's journey, is a basic pattern that its proponents argue is found in many narratives from around the world. This widely distributed pattern was described by Campbell in the book The Hero with a Thousand Faces, which was published in 1949. Campbell believed that numerous myths from disparate times and regions share fundamental structures and stages. Campbell and other scholars, such as Eric Newman, describe narratives of Gautama Buddha, Moses, and Christ in terms of the monomyth. And Campbell argues that classic myths come from many cultures follow this basic pattern. Now, and this is the basic pattern. In a monomyth, the hero begins in the ordinary world and receives a call to enter an unknown world of strange powers and events. The hero accepts the call to enter this strange world, must face tasks and trials, either alone or with assistance. In the most intense version of the narrative, the hero must survive a severe challenge, often with help. If the hero survives, he may achieve a great gift or get a boon. The hero must then decide whether to return to the ordinary world with his boon. If the hero decides not to return, he or she often faces challenges on the return journey. If the hero returns successfully, the boon or gift may be used to improve the world. And I should also say that the help that the hero receives, or the heroine, is usually of a supernatural nature. I mean, think about Ulysses in this context, all right? Or Sinbad the Sailor. Think about all those hero stories, okay? And in fact, Theseus as well, Prometheus, in fact, right? Which is probably a less a nice example. But again, the stories of Osiris, Prometheus, Moses, and Gautama Buddha, for example, follow this structure very closely. Campbell describes 17 stages or steps along this journey. And there's a really great diagram which you guys can look up online. It's very neatly drawn out. Very few myths contain all stages, all 17. Some myths contain many, while others contain only a few. Some myths may focus only on one stage, while other myths may deal with the stages in a somewhat different order. However, these 17 stages may be organized in a number of ways, including division into three distinct sections. Now, section 1 is the departure of the hero, also sometimes called separation from the world that the hero knows. Initiation, which are the trials and tribulations and eventually fulfilling, the goal. And then finally, the return. Departure deals with the hero's adventure prior to the quest. Initiation deals with the hero's many adventures, and the return deals with the hero's return home with knowledge and powers acquired on the journey. And I can think of scores of hero stories which follow that very structure. Now, you could argue that this is probably the most interesting way to structure a story, but there are other ways to structure stories as well. And it's especially in mythology that these stages are followed so closely. So I think it's just fascinating stuff, to be honest with you. The next component is the axis mundi, which means the axis of the world, translated. Many mythologies mention a place that sits at the center of the world and acts as a point of contact between different levels of the universe. Okay, and the interesting thing is that this axis mundi, this world axis or center of the world, is often marked by a sacred tree or other mythical object. Now, you come to mind the world ash of the North mythology. You've got the tree mythology again in the Garden of Eden as well. But other examples are, many myths describe a great tree or pillar joining heaven, earth, and the underworld. Vedic India, ancient China, and the ancient Germans all had myths featuring a cosmic tree whose branches reach heaven and whose roots reach hell. Again, it's why a tree, right? I mean, you could use any any symbolism or any picture for any image, right, Dave?
Yeah, it could be a river or an animal or something. You could just draw a picture, an icon or something.
Or a mountain or anything, right, guys? But no, it's a tree. And again, this is we're talking about similarities, and I'm not telling you, or Dave and I are not telling you this is why they are similar, but rather that they are. That's the key thing. There are a few more myths. The next one, we've got another few minutes before we hit the break, so I'm going to take you quickly through this. There's something called Titanomachy or Titanomachy, which refers to the study of titans. Many cultures have a creation myth in which a group of younger, more civilized gods conquer and or struggle against a group of older gods who represent the forces of chaos. Naturally, because the younger gods usually win. So, and the victor writes the history, so they can portray these older gods as anything they want, and usually in a very bad light. In the Greek myth of the Titanomachy, the Olympian gods defeat the Titans, an older and more primitive divine race, and establish cosmic order. Now, bear in mind that the Olympian gods, like Zeus and Athena and so forth, are actually the children of the Titans. So the children kill the Titans, who are the elder gods. In Hindu mythology, the Devas, the gods, battle the Asuras, which they describe as demons. And the Celtic gods of life and light struggle against the Fomorians, ancient gods of death and darkness. This brings to mind again, the works of this great writer, and his name escapes me. His book is on my shelf, but I can't see it right now. Who talks about the chaos gods? Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft. So he delves deeply into this kind of mythology where the elder gods may come back one day. And the movie In the Mouth of Madness is a very good recent adaptation of that kind of theme, where the elder gods are coming through the mind of an insane writer and take over the world. And it's very, very interesting how this kind of thing still plays on us. The myth of the gods conquering demons and order conquering chaos, which is interesting when you talk about quantum physics, is especially common in Indo-European mythologies. Some scholars suggest that the myth reflects the ancient Indo-Europeans' conquest of native peoples during their expansion over Europe and India. Maybe. However, non-Indo-European cultures also have such myths. For example, yeah, absolutely. Many Near Eastern mythologies include a combat myth in which a good god battles an evil or a chaotic demon. An example of that is the Babylonian Enuma Elish, and you have something that the Zoroastrians also had, where Ahura Mazda fights Ahriman, I guess the equivalent of that. And Zoroastrian, while it's a monotheistic religion, predates both Hebrew and obviously Christian religions by several hundred, if not thousands of years. Interesting. Now, then there's the Deus Otiosus, okay, or the idol god, the god that just, is around but doesn't do a lot. Now, many cultures believe in a celestial supreme being who has cut off contact with humanity. And that's really the theme for Supernatural, if you've watched that TV show. Historian Mircea Eliade calls this supreme being a Deus Otiosus, or idol god. Although the term is also used more broadly and refers to any god who doesn't really interact with humans. And in many myths, the supreme being withdraws into the heavens after the creation of the world. Baluba mythology features such a story in which the supreme god withdraws from the earth, leaving man to search for him. Similarly, the mythology of the Hereros tells of a sky god who has abandoned mankind to lesser divinities. In the mythologies of highly complex cultures, the supreme being tends to disappear completely, replaced by a strongly polytheistic belief system, as we have seen come out in Hinduism, certainly within the Greek and Roman pantheon of gods. So these are highly sophisticated and complex cultures. Same with Egyptians, and in fact, South American cultures. While there is a creator god in the beginning, a sky god, a father god, or whatever, even a female deity, in some cultures, usually that ultimate source of power disappears and is replaced by a pantheon of gods, which is very, very interesting, and may reflect some reality several thousand years ago. Now, finally, another area of myths that are shared amongst many cultures are the ones describing the origin of their customs, rituals, and identity. And that's I guess, normal. In fact, ancient and traditional societies have often justified their customs by claiming that their gods or mythical heroes established those customs. Now, I would like to direct your attention here to the Annunaki, to Quetzalcoatl, who was the great white and bearded teacher of the South Americans. But there are other stories as well, and again, we're coming to the cargo cults to some extent here, where others are given the credit for cultural achievements of that particular culture. So rather than being proud of what a culture has achieved, you go, no, the gods gave us this, or God gave us this, or these supreme divine sky people came and gave us this, right?
Lots of sky people and people who came down from heaven.
Right.
And the gods were here walking amongst us.
Yep.
And they left again.
Yep. Absolutely, right? So there's this. I mean, if you achieved it all on your own, then why don't you take credit for it? It's interesting, and sometimes it's really funny as to what specifics were given the people by these, let's call them divine teachers. There's one myth of the Australian Karajeri, the mythical Bagajimbri brothers established all of the Karajeri's customs. Including, funnily enough, the position in which one needs to stand while one urinates.
Clearly, they weren't doing that well beforehand.
Clearly. So, just to leave you with some thoughts, we'll talk about mythological creatures after the break. But
in the last 3 minutes before the break, I have to tell you that if you have a visitor from space telling you how you should urinate, I really suggest you should reevaluate your whole society. Sorry, just to break it up. But you're absolutely right, Mackie. You know, the Anunnaki, the people who founded civilization, the first civilization on this planet, could have just gone, "No, we did it. You know, we were awesome."
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't. They said, "These people told us what to do. These people gave us this information. They taught us how to farm, how to build a society, how to do all the things we do." And the Quetzalcoatl, etc. Same thing.
Yep.
I can't believe that someone would want to give up the ability to have claimed it for themselves, but no, in pure honesty, say that it was somebody else.
Yep.
Someone else told us how to do this. Like we were just walking aimlessly in the desert and someone said, "You know what, you can actually farm? Awesome.
Let's do that."
Yeah.
And you know, there's actually more to the story of Quetzalcoatl, or Kukulkan, if he was known in other regions of South America. He said he would come back. So he set sail into a land in the east, which is from a South American point of view, Europe or Africa, and said, "I'll come back on this particular day." Now, unfortunately, and one of the greatest maybe coincidences of history, that the Spanish happened to arrive on the day that he said he would come back.
Mm-hmm.
So the Mayas didn't really, well, you know, I think it was the Mayas, it was the Mayas, or the Incas.
Not only that, but he resembled them, pale with red hair.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question was asked, well, how did the Spanish, with, you know, a couple hundred people, a couple hundred conquistadors, no matter how much gunpowder they had, manage to subdue an entire culture of millions of people? This is how you do it. You just come on the same day as the god said he would come back, and you bamboozle the living daylights out of the people on the ground, and that's how you can conquer a culture. So that's really no, you know, it's funny, it's interesting.
Let's not forget the Anunnaki also said that they would return.
Yes, correct.
Yeah,
correct. And if those cultures had survived more successfully than they have, then it might be. Oh, and there's the break. Don't go anywhere.
We'll see you on the other side of the break. Take care.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
There is no denying the world is awakening. We see it in the global uprisings and demonstrations of the people around the planet and the new way of thinking and living that is arising naturally within each one of us and our communities. I have been a major player in this global shift and movement for over 20 years and have helped tens of thousands of people around the world change their lives and find their voice in order to help create the paradigm change we so desperately need. Join me here at Revolution Radio on the Just Bernard Show every Tuesday at noon Eastern Time for 2 hours of powerful interviews and discussion with some of the most influential visionaries of consciousness, alternative media, and suppressed knowledge. We promise to reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience.
realize you're caught in a dream. The adventure begins. Put your seatbacks and tray tables in the upright position as we take a trip in the very fabric of reality. Join me, Andrew Bartis, for Adventures into Reality, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 10 a.m. to 12 noon at Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps.
I can hear him banging. He's trying to get in. He's getting close to the door. I'm going to go ahead and get the gun out. It's a shotgun. It's large.
Every time our country stands in the path of danger, an instinct seems to summon her finest first. Those who truly understand her. When freedom shivers in the cold shadow of true peril, it's always the patriots who first hear the call.
Be here Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. till 10 a.m. Eastern Time with Clayton Douglas, the Free American, right here on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Don't miss each and every show. It should be a fantastic adventure into ideas of freedom and liberty. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. If you plan to call in and speak with one of our hosts, please turn down your radio and separate yourself from any background noise and wait for the area code to be called on before you speak. And don't forget, Revolution Radio freedomslips.com is listener supported. So stop by the homepage, freedomslips.com, visit the site support area to help support the host you're listening to's airtime. Thank you. Revolution Radio freedomslips.com, where the truth never sleeps. Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
You're back with Dave and Mecky's Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com. This is Listener Funded Radio. If you like what you hear, please go to freedomslips.com and push the donate button. Your donation is greatly appreciated and helps us run the station. We are halfway through show number 61, and we're talking about
comparative mythology.
Awesome. Don't forget, take some time and go to shinysideout.net. I can't believe that we're packing so much in. Our shows are awesome. The chat room's alive. Hey to everyone in the chat. I want to say there's probably 60 people in the chat right now.
Really?
And
wow.
Yeah, there is. Have a look.
Hang on. Oh, you're right. There's a lot of people.
It's absolutely going off in the chat room.
Dang.
Don't forget, if you're listening to this on YouTube, please go back in time to an actual chat room and talk to people. Think about this, people. You can talk to us while we're on air.
And you're entirely anonymous, so you can log in as Schmoopy, something number, or you can choose your own avatar, well, by that I mean really pseudonym, and chat away. Leave your real name if you really want to. Give us your phone number, bank account details. No, I'm just kidding. But do join the chat. It is interactive. We do try to take the questions if they come from the chat room, answer them live on air, certainly with our interview guests, but also when we talk about topics like we are today. So it's great to interact. It's a really, like we spoke about this earlier when we first started doing this, Dave, right? It's fantastic to have such an interactive medium available to us. It's just unbelievable.
Well, there hasn't been any time in history this has been available to anyone.
Mm.
The DJs or the people on air would be stuck in a booth somewhere. You would never see them. All you had was a telephone to be able to talk to them. Not the way it is now. You can message us. You can, we have Twitter. We have YouTube and Facebook. You can friend us. You can message us. We'll reply. We're real people. You can be in the chat room on air while we're on air. And whilst there's a slight delay for our protection, if we have a caller. But you know what, to be honest, this is the way the world is going. You can do this now. So, jump in and say hello.
Yeah. Just on that, and sorry to distract from this show, but there's something I need to talk to you guys about.
What's that?
The incredible power and capability of the interweb. There's a guy, and I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying it's something that's out there. There's a guy, and you might have seen this, that published the plans, the instructions for a plastic gun to be printed by a 3D printer. So if you've got a 3D printer, you can now print your own gun at home. And he said,
awesome.
Yeah, he said, look, I believe in the right to bear arms. I believe in gun control to some extent, but I believe that everybody has got the right to defend themselves. And this has now become a moot point because anybody can download this particular CAD and has a 3D printer. It'll probably cost something like $4 or $5 to print this particular plastic gun, which is capable, it's a 2-shot gun, which is capable of firing actual bullets. I don't know what the caliber size is. That may be able to be modified as you print it, but the point here is that we truly are living in an information age. Information is power, and the interweb still has made it equal for everybody. Everybody can access information that has the means to access it, be it computer, or smartphone, whatever, even from your local library. So it's anarchy in action.
I have on my desk here. I have a thing called a Twizzle that was made on a 3D printer at one of those computer shows, and I was showing off. And the 3D printers aren't really that bad. They're not that expensive. I like the one that's made of fine dust myself that produces a better item. Except this thing that they've got is it makes something about 4 inches by 4 inches cubic, and the software will take your DWG, your drawing file from CAD, and reconstruct it in pieces so that you can later on glue it back together. You can make an object bigger than the dimensions of its construction area. They're very good.
Isn't it astonishing, Dave? I mean, we're talking about a replicator here to some extent, right?
We're almost there. We just can't make it out of any material whatsoever. I think there should be, like a microwave oven, there should be a little flap at the back where you put, say, a shovel full of dirt, and at the front of it comes, your finished meal.
Cheeseburger, French fries, and a soft drink. Yes.
I might choose something a little healthier.
You might, but I probably won't. So, and if you go to my blog, guys, then you probably know what I eat. But they have recently printed a 3-dimensional ear in one of those 3D printers. To be used as a prosthetic device for a person. Sorry, that's just as an aside, because Dave, you mentioned a very important thing, which is the freedom of information that exists on the interweb. People like Dave and I, and I guess most of the other hosts on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, would be confined to a ship broadcasting from somewhere offshore in international waters. in the
Pirate
old days.
radio.
That's right, because nobody would give us a license to do this, I think. But there you are.
Well, the people who hold the ability to give you a license would restrict this information.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is where I sort of was a little upset. I couldn't test all of my theories because my iPad and my internet connection wasn't as good as I wanted to be in China. I wanted to see which sites I could go to and which sites I could not go to, but because of my limited access to everything, means I couldn't get to very many sites at all.
You couldn't get to much at all, yeah.
which may or may not be by design, but it was certainly hampering my efforts. Nonetheless,
it may have supported your theory somewhat. But,
yeah, look, it's maybe it's all part of a bigger plan to access, so to restrict the access of ordinary folks like us, because we're just ordinary folks working for the man, trying to make a crust. Which reminds me, please donate if you can. This is a entirely listener-funded radio station that Hawk is running here. We don't get paid. None of the other show hosts get paid, to my knowledge, and we don't make a dime out of it. Dave and I dedicate and donate our time to this because we love doing it. It's fun, and it's my time away from my real job, which is great.
Yeah, we all like time away from our real job. I'm going to segue this directly into, for some reason, mythological creatures.
Which is very far away from my real job, I'll tell you that.
You really? Have you met my co-employees?
We have put together a list of mythological creatures that are common to many cultures, rather than being ethnocentric. And we've done this to show you that, in fact, there are creatures, not just stories, but creatures that seem to dance in and out of all of the cultures of the world, which would denote either a common origin or, in fact, the reality of these creatures, if you know what I mean. And one creature that I actually forgot to put on this list is Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti, Alma, Swamp Man, whatever you want to call it, which is also prevalent in all of the cultures, in all of the regions of the world. There's a large, hairy humanoid of great intelligence, apparently, that is running through the forests and mountains. Okay, so that's just the first one. Sorry, Dave, I actually forgot to add this one into our list.
I'm sure you're going to add that into the list.
I'm adding it now, absolutely. So that's certainly one, and this is really what we mean by what do you mean by that? Common in many cultures. They might be called something different, but essentially it's describing the same creature. Okay, and of course we're only talking about the English terms, but trust me, almost every culture out there has got a term for the creatures we're just about to describe to you. So Bigfoot was one of them.
Hit them off one at a time.
Go ahead,
yeah?
do it.
Okay, so we have ghosts. This is not restricted to anyone in particular. It's many cultures, and these are, as we all know, spirits of the dead who haunt the living. Role in the arts is another column we've got here, which is the ghost of Hamlet's father is a prominent character in Shakespeare's Hamlet, for instance. Dickens' A Christmas Carol, we all know about that. The ghost of Christmas past comes back to take him through his issues that he has to solve. Many movies have been made about ghosts, including the movie Ghosts. And there's certainly many hauntings. One of my favorite, if you like to feel emotion during movies, one is Truly, Madly, Deeply. You should see that. It's an English film.
That's awesome.
Yeah, man, I cried from start to finish in that one. That was just brilliant.
Yeah,
a beautiful movie.
Yeah, I didn't cry. I just had something in my eye though. So.
No, I was cutting onions.
The next one, which is across all cultures, very much is the story of giants, and then they can take different shapes and forms. And they're gigantic, obviously by the name of giant humanoid creatures. Their personalities vary from benevolent to evil, depending on the culture and source. Now, also, some are not so bright, and some, in fact, are very, very smart. I remember my mom telling me in German mythology, and this is for our German-speaking audience, Rübezahl, or the counter of carrots, if you will, or tubers, which was a mountain ghost or mountain. In fact, both terms apply equally to this particular one. Mountain giant who lived inside the mountain, and you might have heard the Mountain King. They all live inside the mountain, have great treasures, and he was made to count tubers by a woman that didn't want to marry him, and she ran away. So he wasn't too bright. Some famous giants in literature appear in fairy tales, like for example Jack and the Beanstalk, and many mythologies feature giants like Jotuns of Norse mythology and the Titans of Greek myth. Okay, you've got the frost giants as well in Norse mythology. Ymir was one of the frost giants who was slain to create the world, and we spoke about this when we spoke about the divine or the creative sacrifice. Other famous giants, and this is really interesting, are the Brobdingnagians from Swift's Gulliver's Travels and Paul Bunyan of American Folklore. So everybody who hasn't read Swift's Gulliver's Travels, please read it. It's not a children's book. Get the original, not the abridged version. It is the most pointed political satire you will ever come across. And interestingly, it contains some very interesting facts, certainly about the moons of Mars, which Swift was not meant to have known.
Isn't that incredible? It's incredible.
Yep. It is. So there's more to Swift than meets the eye. Read Gulliver's Travels, not a children's book, please. Dave, what's the next one?
Okay, we've got demons. Now, this is also many cultures. I should leave that comment out because they are to do with many cultures. Malevolent magic spirits that may be conjured and commanded, but with great peril to the conjurer, usually, or their intended foe. Demons appear frequently in both the Old and the New Testaments of the Bible, therefore becoming important in Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. I don't know where my teeth went. They are also important in Hinduism. Look, to demonize a person means to portray them as evil. We know that in our culture, yeah? Demons are important characters in Dante's Divine Comedy, Milton's Paradise Lost, and Goethe's Faust, Faust. The Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis is a series of letters written by a demon to one of his trainees. Well, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
But demons, if you talk about conjuring, it could be through magic. It's usually via a spell book or something if we're looking at stories. But these exist. This is what we're saying across cultures.
Yes, absolutely. And this is really fascinating stuff, especially with the demons. But the next one, and this is one I want to spend a little bit more time on, is goblins. Specifically goblins, not hobgoblins or orcs or whatever. In fact, orcs are an invention of J.R.R. Tolkien, in case you were wondering. They're nimble little thieves with distorted features. Important. Nimble little thieves with distorted features. They are generally stupid and nasty, always looking for something to steal. Now, the reason I wanted to spend some time on this, because recently it has come to light after genetic testing that there is this little tiny humanoid figure, like a mummy almost, called Atta the humanoid. Atta was found in South America some time ago, and it truly is about the size of a man's index finger, maybe a little bit bigger. And it's perfectly human in its dimensions. The head is a little distorted, so you could say a little wonky. And for the longest time, people believed, this is probably evidence of an alien. Recent DNA testing has found that it's actually human. And then people said, oh, well, you know what? It's probably an aborted fetus. It is, something like that, whatever, because it's so small. No,
however,
it is not. In fact, the tests that were run, and I guess they have to do with wear and tear of the teeth as well as the joints and bones and whatnot, has determined that Atta the humanoid, at I think 8 or 9 inches tall, lived to the age of 6 or 8 years. 6 or 8 years. All of a sudden, stories like Tom Thumb, or stories of goblins, stories of little creatures helping the tailor in Cologne and whatnot, become a lot less fantastic, because there's physical evidence, guys. Physical evidence for the existence of this tiny little creature. Now,
can I just say that it's been supported by the people in the area in which it was found, with their own stories about this creature living in not packs of people, but certainly being seen readily by the people of that area, and they have these stories that go back generations that you don't leave anything around. They will come and steal. They're opportunists.
Yep.
It's just unusual. It's unusual in that it wasn't until the presence of this in the mainstream media in the recent past, just as it was brought up in the hearings. Stephen Greer brought it up as well. Yeah. recently, and then this discovery. Suddenly, everyone's on top of it, and the information's coming out. So we're very pleased that they're bringing this information forward.
Oh, absolutely. And look, we are a little sad maybe that it proved to be human, but on the same by the same token, because we are the shiny side out, and this is the tinfoil hat zone. Any mystery, any anomaly that gets closer to being resolved is really awesome, and we really hope that more information is forthcoming. But bear in mind, this child really lived to the age of 6 or 8, so it must have been functioning as like it was walking, talking, probably around. So it grew. Obviously, it was born smaller. Maybe. I mean, who knows, right? I mean, the point is that it is biologically possible for such a creature to live. And this is really the most important thing, because we always tend to think, oh, well, human beings as they are now, that's the pinnacle, that's how they always have been. Disagree. I think human beings could be a lot taller, a lot shorter, quite differently. In fact, we saw the discovery of the Homo floresiensis in Papua New Guinea, right? The small people, like the so-called hobbit people, if you want. A whole new branch of humanity, a lot smaller than regular folk. And these stories of the goblins, let's call them, because they're not quite dwarves, are pervading every culture. Okay, there's a goblin market. There's a poem by Christina Rossetti. There's a famous line from Little Orphan Annie by James Whitcomb Riley, which is, "The goblins will get you if you don't watch out." So it's everywhere. And if you speak to any member of an ancient culture or of an indigenous culture that hasn't been, brainwashed by the West, you will find these stories, and it's quite common for these things to be taken as fact. It is only us that don't believe it. I'll give you a very, very simple example, very quickly. There's Coelacanth, which is a fish. And this particular fish, which is like a very primitive fish, last appeared in the fossil record 60 million years ago. When the dinosaurs died out. 60 million years ago, last sighting of the fossil record, which is a whole different problem in itself, because the fossil record, of course, is not conclusive, because we haven't seen all of the fossils in existence. They're still dug, in the earth. Nonetheless,
still in rock. That's
yeah.
Right.
So, but nonetheless, so the assumption was, well, this fish obviously died out 60 million years ago. Well, fair assumption. I haven't seen anything since then. However, live fish have been caught as a matter of course of the Indian in the Indian Ocean, of the coast of several islands, and in fact the coast of Madagascar as well as.
That's right. Madagascar was the one I was going to bring up.
Yep. Recently and frequently, in fact, pictures have been taken, so it's no longer a big mystery that this coelacanth has actually survived for the last 60 million years unchanged. Okay, it didn't undergo any evolution or adaptation. It is the same fish as it was then, same size, same everything.
And what is also interesting about it is that they still survive despite no further fossil records.
Yes, exactly. So
think about it, people.
Exactly right, Dave. What does it tell us? It tells us, it's good to have the fossil record. It's great, but you know what? It's not infallible. It is not infallible, and this is my argument for the extreme antiquity of the human race. I believe we're a lot older than people give us credit for, but that's a whole different story. Nonetheless, my point is, people take the word of the locals not for granted. They doubt them because they're uneducated. They haven't gone to Harvard. They didn't do paleontology. Blah blah blah.
There's no peer-reviewed papers.
Yeah, it's just life experience. Yeah, what's that worth really? Life experience. Go do something else. So I'm a little upset that people take this attitude to local peoples that know their environment. They live in their environment, and they're usually living a lot closer to nature than we do today. Okay, so there you go. Whew, that was a mouthful, Dave. Take us to the next, next creature.
I'm going to say these creatures are called the mer people. These are creatures with human torsos and fish tails. Mermaids spring to mind. My children are fascinated with mermaids at the moment, who are probably the most well-known of the mer people, and sometimes thought to lure sailors to their doom. We've all heard of the sirens.
Yes.
Not sirens as in car sirens, but sirens as in the people would sit on islands and lure their people to their doom by this wonderful song that was irresistible. The Rhine maidens in Wagner's opera.
Yes.
Das Rheinhold.
Yes.
Are mermaids. The artist John William Waterhouse painted. It's the painting called A Mermaid. Andersen's fairy tale, The Little Mermaid, was made into an animated film by Disney. You know what? Disney knew more than he let on.
Oh yeah.
If you haven't seen the UFO mystery, the Disney one,
you know what?
that one out.
I'll post it into the chat
Please.
right now because I've got it open. Here we go. Yeah, that's the kind of guy I am. Here we go.
The movie Splash, we've all seen that. That's mainstream. We're talking this made it all the way from a myth all the way to the mainstream Hollywood movie, Splash, with a very delightful looking, what's her name? With 6 toes.
Daryl Hannah.
Daryl Hannah, exactly. If you didn't know about the toe thing, check it out. And the comic book hero, Aquaman, is a merman.
Yes.
I like Birdman myself, but anyway, that's another whole nother story about people flying with wings and feathers. I think this is one of those extraordinary things. Now, remember that people were sailing around the oceans for so long, and for whatever purpose, whether they were fake adventurers, just not really doing anything or going anywhere, just sailing around in circles for 8 months and then coming back to shore going, wow, we found this island. Jeez, it was awesome. There was so much stuff. Oh, and we nearly got eaten by a sea creature in the sea. It was so big it could have swallowed our ship in one bite. We've actually found some of those creatures, the giant squid.
Yes.
That could literally envelop one of those sailing ships from those days.
And there are these woodcuts depicting it, right?
Yeah.
They are. And they're quite, if you look at them, they're actually quite accurate if you look at the creature itself. So the people back then, woodcuts, we're talking several hundred years ago. So they must have seen it, done the woodcut, and go, oh yeah, you're lying, of course, because nothing like that exists. The Kraken, yeah, sure.
Do you know what? Some of the creatures that the Aboriginal Native Australians, once again, this is the Australian slant on our show, by the way, some of their cave paintings are anatomically correct. They even paint the internal organs of the creatures, because, they clearly eat them. They cut them open and eat them. They describe which bits you should and shouldn't eat, which is really interesting as well. However, some of the creatures that they found drawings of don't exist anymore.
Right.
And they're anatomically correct. Like the largest marsupial on the planet was about the size of a rhinoceros. And that's an extraordinary thing. A marsupial, that big, with a pouch. Think about it.
Oh, absolutely.
So you could crawl into the pouch and sleep.
In fact, your entire family could probably.
Absolutely. These are ginormous things. Anyway, so you have, like we're saying, we're punctuating this throughout the show, is that you should take into consideration the local people's word and don't throw away the baby with the bathwater and associate myth with, non-belief.
Totally. Guys, I mean, these are our cultures as well. I mean, we've been bred apart now in the West, thinking, we're so much better, information comes out of the tube or whatever. And that's all good. The truth is, most of us have not even lived properly. How many of you have actually gone out into nature, gone away from a city that's 1,000 kilometers away? How many? If you raise your hand, great. You will have seen things that other people won't believe. If you've spent time in the woods, in the jungle, somewhere where no other person is, in the desert, I don't care. You will have seen things that other people haven't seen. The sky is clear. You probably see things in the sky. You probably hear noises. You see tracks you haven't seen before. You can't identify. Okay, because we are mostly living in an urbanized area for most of our lives. Even travel today, we go from airport to airport. Nobody takes a sea voyage anymore. It takes too long. It's too expensive. You're wasting too much time. Yeah, well, maybe, but you also don't see anything. You don't experience anything. Everything that you take in as a visual or audio stimulant is controlled for the most part. Okay.
I'm gonna liken this. Just instead of driving to the shops, walk to the shops. If you do that, you'll see stuff that you wouldn't normally have seen, and this is what we're talking about.
Yeah. When people say stop and smell the roses, actually do that. You can't do it when you're driving. Yeah, good luck. Well, you can try. I don't know.
Your dog with its head out the window can.
Yes, the other motorists probably wouldn't welcome you doing this. But nonetheless, the truth is this: most of what we take for granted as reality is not reality. It is filtered. It is a close approximation of life. You're having near life experiences every day. go out into nature and go camping. Take your creature comforts with you, but really go somewhere where you normally wouldn't go, and just observe nature. And you might actually see things that'll freak you out, which is cool, because that means you're growing as a person. Someone once said, every new experience is a little frightening and off-putting. Everything else is just sleeping and board meetings, and that's probably true. So you want to have as many new experiences as you can. Every new journey should not begin with the first step, but with a new set of eyes. Guys, try that. So I'm preaching again, aren't I, Dave? Sorry, man.
Yeah, that's okay. Let's move on to the next one.
Poltergeists, right? Now, we actually had a show on ghosts and poltergeists. Once again, this is purported to be a mythological creature across the spectrum. Every culture has some kind of description of this kind of phenomenon. Invisible and very active energy forces, they're described as. They often infest, well, I don't know if I want to say infest necessarily, but they certainly inhabit homes or families with pre-teens or young teens, so young children. So the thought is that maybe the children have something to do with that, and that's certainly one of the explanations that we've seen. Their presence is made obvious because things begin to move and fly through the air without any visible cause. Movies like Supernatural, was it Paranormal Activity? Are probably one of the best proponents of recent times to understand what this phenomenon looks like. It's a real thing. The word poltergeist itself is actually German, and polter means to rumble or to make a noise, and geist means ghost or spirit. But geist also refers to the Holy Spirit, so it's a multi-level meaning there. Steven Spielberg hopefully has made a movie, Poltergeist, and Poltergeist also appear in Harry Potter books. Dean Koontz. It's a popular genre, and now with Paranormal Activity as well. So Poltergeist, we spend a lot of time on past shows, again across all cultures. Therefore, a phenomenon one would think is has more reality than people give it credence for.
And then we come into one of my favorites, and it takes me back to a lovely movie which I'll get to at the end. The werebeasts. These are humans who are able to shapeshift or turn themselves into animal bodies, usually during the full moon. The full moon actually plays a huge part. We've done a whole moon show on this in our culture, in our civilization, in our biology, and the way our reproduction cycles. So unlike shapeshifters, werebeasts cannot control the change. The most famous werebeast is the werewolf, but many other types exist, like werebears and werecats. Many films have featured werewolves, such as The Werewolf Man, starring Lon Chaney Jr., Just Wolf, starring Jack Nicholson, and this is my favorite, An American Werewolf in London, starring David Norton.
Hilarious.
I love that film to death. That is the funniest film.
If you haven't seen it, you have to see it. Really, it is funny.
It's funny, and you know what? It took our generation by complete surprise. It was a left field movie. Oh, what we'll go see this? Who knew that it was going to be so great?
Yeah.
It's almost cult. Werewolves have also been featured in many modern fantasy books, including those by Rowling, DeLint, and Pratchett.
Absolutely.
Do you know what? It's one of those things, and now obviously, vampires versus werewolves trilogies are out. Which side do you take?
Yes.
It's polarizing the community.
Yeah,
but we'll get into the other half of that in a minute.
It's actually no, you're right. It is funny. Just one more thing, and obviously what falls under this as well are the Skinwalkers and the Skinwalker Ranch, and I think we spent a whole show on that as well, guys. So go back to the archives and listen to that. A fascinating phenomenon, which can't be explained properly. And some people even believe that Bigfoot may be related to this particular phenomenon. Maybe not. Don't know. Certainly, shamans claim to have the power at will to shapeshift, so they were not quite the werebeast. Werebeasts usually had a curse or some kind of compulsion to change. The next one is witches. Now witches are not so much, I guess, mythological creatures as they are real adherents to a cult called Wicca. They are not devil worshippers. Okay, however, they were thought to be devil worshippers because they prayed to a goat, god of nature and fertility. See Pan and similar creatures of Greek mythology. In the Middle Ages, like I said, they were thought to be evil. And what I think they were just another source of competition for the Christian church, and they were burned. Tens of thousands, in fact, were burned. And even if you were a little different, or if someone had a beef with you, the quickest way to get rid of you was to denounce you as a witch, and you would be very quickly put away. Today, witches have recovered in some ways, which is true, and can be seen as wise and good, also true. And in fact, Wicca itself is a nature-worshipping religion. It's one of the elder religions with a female deity, which is another thorn in the side of Christianity, which is, of course, male-centric. So do not make a quick judgment. So the reason we've put it in here, though, is because that particular religion or view of the world is pervasive through all cultures on the planet and predates the male-centric monotheism that we are enjoying today, or most of us are enjoying today, in the form of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity in all its many shapes and forms. And witches have been portrayed in many films. It's The Wizard of Oz, Blair Witch Project, I Married a Witch, Witches of Eastwick, usually in a negative way, which beholds, I guess, the old tradition. There've always been the odd ones out that give the positive light, such as Bewitched, the 1960s TV series, which was a good witch in a way, if you will. And certainly the recent Harry Potter novels have given wizards and witches a whole new lease on life, and something the Catholic Church doesn't really quite condone, and would probably be happy if that had never occurred. Mm-hmm. Another one, Dave, that we forgot to put on the list are probably vampires.
Yes.
Or vampiria, and rather than the were-based and lycanthropes, and you mentioned it just now, obviously. Mm-hmm. You're quite right. Bloodsuckers of some description or another, be they in fact actual bloodsuckers or psychic vampires, meaning they're sucking your life energy or come to you in your dreams.
Very nice, yes.
Right. So these are all creatures that are in fact described in all cultures in the world as well. And you can actually draw a link here to recent abduction experiences as well. Because some abductees describe, and I have as well, and I'm not an abductee, but I've certainly described to you guys my waking, paralysis or sleeping paralysis, whatever you want to call it, where you see this dark shadow. And sometimes it's described as sitting on one's chest, sucking the life energy from you. And certainly, if you have these experiences, you do feel drained having had them, Dave. Do I say the wrong thing? I mean,
No, you're absolutely, you're right. The vampire and all of its myths going back, in all of, I shouldn't say that. I hate the word myth. It's all today's show. As far back as the Western cultures are concerned, it's certainly been there. I know there's been has it been so prevalent in the Eastern cultures? Do you know?
Yes.
The vampire, the thing that can come to you at your night against your will.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, it goes a bit further. There's the old man that sits on your back and which you have to carry around for the rest of your life, which is a variation of that. Yeah, it's okay. In German Buckelgeist, but that's a very very common Middle Eastern variance on the theme.
Well, the Western version of that is monkey on your back.
Yes, exactly, exactly that.
So I know this one sort of firsthand. To some of the stories in my family have talked about there being, because I had a highly paranormal growing up, with my mum being what she called a medium. She called herself a medium, and we called her an extra large.
That was funny, guys. Come on.
Boom tish. Our family having Irish, Russian, and Dutch heritage, from the Russian side, the Middle Europe was very superstitious, and I have to say the word superstitious as in believing in the paranormal, and if you don't do the right thing, it'll get its way back at you. That's really what superstition is all about. Yeah. Being able to do the things that will prevent these things from occurring. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about hanging garlic from every part of your house to prevent a vampire, but certainly it's been talked about, and I know it's one of the earliest films ever made was a vampiral film.
Yes, Nosferatu.
Good man.
It was
Somehow
a German.
I knew you.
No, of course I know. Fritz Lang, who also made Metropolis, made Nosferatu, which is an eerie and actually really scary portrayal of a Nosferatu or vampire, Dave, right?
Yeah, it is. And I've just typed in our little chat between us. Awesome.
It's and that's when the German film industry was more than it is today. But look, it's not just Transylvania that has the vampire myth, guys. It just happens to be that Vlad the Impaler lived there, and the vampire myths were overlaid upon his gruesome record of impaling the invading Turks on stakes and even feasting on their blood, or so legend has it. So he just became an honorary vampire, I guess, at that point.
Yeah, it's a pretty awesome thing to do. You're not going to walk into an area with a whole bunch of dead foe on sticks. It's a little bit of a
it's a little bit of an ointment in your soup. It's a downer when you have a party. So where's Mustafa? Oh, yeah, he's just impaled by Vlad the Impaler. Oh, okay, yeah, that's
okay. I'm crossing it off my next party list of decorations.
It's yeah. Look, and it was a fearsome display, of course, and intended, of course, to discourage any further incursions into Transylvania, or as we know it in Germany, Siebenbürgen, which means 7 mountains. Got to flaunt our language skills, don't we? So now, this
is there a special book of notes, Neki?
There in fact is a special book of note, which is sitting on my shelf. It's called Hamlet's Mill. And Hamlet's Mill, and this is probably going to be the last topic we're going to be able to discuss today, guys. And I want to quickly do that and then tell you what we do next week. Hamlet's Mill was written by Giorgio, it seems to be like a name for that kind of thing, de Santalina and Herta von der Schend. It was published in November 1969, a few months after my birth. And it essentially deals with this. This is the central premise of the book. Much mythology, or most of the mythology, and ancient literature have been badly misinterpreted. This was back in 69, remember. And that they generally relate to a sort of monomyth. And we discussed this at length now. Conveying significant scientific and specifically astronomical ideas and knowledge. Now, this is the premise of the book in 1969. This is the time when Erich von Däniken started writing as well. Okay, so something happened in the late 60s that brought out a whole bunch of new thoughts in the world, and this is just one expression of that. Fast forward 30 years, what do you have? You have Graham Boval, and you've got the other. He escapes me now, and the English writer. Speaking about exactly this, the alignment of the Sphinx and the alignment of the Great Pyramid to Orion, right? And to the constellation of Leo. Okay, so they have taken the essential content of the Hamlet's Mill and translated it into a context that we all understand now to be true. The pyramids are in fact Orion's belt, and the Sphinx, which was most likely a lion, not a human head, was indeed aligned with the constellation Leo as it was rising on the horizon some 12,000 years ago. Okay, so just to give you a frame of reference. Now, in the book, the proposed interpretation is that A, our ancestors of the high and far off times, like in ancient times, were endowed with minds wholly comparable to our own and were capable of rational processes always given the means at hand. Now, that doesn't seem like an amazing leap of faith today. Back then, suggesting that the people in the Stone Age and further back had similar mental faculties to us was a huge leap. Okay? So that was quite groundbreaking for them. And today we know that certainly, for example, a branch of the humanity called Cro-Magnon, so-called after the valley where they were found, were at least equal in stature, if not more imposing, 6'1", 6'2", with a slightly larger brain case. And we also understand that Neanderthal, contrary to popular belief, had a larger brain than we do by a couple hundred cc's. Okay, so Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon are not the primitive beasts most kids learn in school about. They're actually quite advanced, at least in brain physiology. Number two, that they were particularly fascinated by astronomical observation and that they made many discoveries, particularly the precession of the axis was discovered long before the accepted date of the Greek discovery. And this was discovered by an ancient civilization of unsuspected sophistication, perhaps as late as 4,000 before the Common Era, which is 6,000 years from today, and maybe even further than that, maybe 11, 12, maybe 15, maybe 100,000 years ago. So again, Dave and I have made the case for ancient civilization before. We're not going to repeat ourselves here. However, they believe that the myths that are being passed on from generation to generation reflect that advanced knowledge. Okay, and it's a long book, and it's quite technical, and it's not an easy read, but if you do have the time and the inclination, do yourself a favor and read it. It's called Hamlet's Mill. Now, this civilization believed, so they surmise, that the world passed through a cyclical and zodiacal stage, or stages, based on the precession, and that myths which encode this astronomical knowledge symbolically transmit this belief, typically through a story relating to a millstone and the young protagonist, hence the title Hamlet's Mill. Comes from a prototype of the Shakespearean Prince Hamlet, the Scandinavian Amlodi of Saxo Grammaticus or Snorri Sturluson. Okay? Now these are interesting names. I won't bore you with them.
He is not mispronouncing them.
No, that's how they're written. And indeed, the majority of myths have to do with astronomy and are not principally related to other things, such as the weather or the bedroom manners of the gods. So, what then does this book tell us in 1969? It tells us that these scholars have found that most myths that are transmitted through the ages are most likely form a monomyth, meaning they came from a common source at some time in the past. And they also believe that these myths expressed some scientific facts. Most prominently, it seems, astronomical facts about the precession of the equinoxes. Okay? And long before it is accepted by mainstream science, it was discovered by us. So they shifted back thousands of years before we were meant to have discovered it. Again, groundbreaking. And to this point, the criticism leveled against this book has not been damning. I mean, it has not been, a derision. People accept the high scholarship that went into it. Again, very difficult to read, so it's not really that accessible to most readers out there, because you really have to, and trust me, I did it, you really have to invest some time and cranial capacity to work through it. But it's a fascinating read, and it makes a very, very strong point. I don't necessarily agree with all of it, but I certainly agree with the finding that our ancestors in the dim and distant past were much more advanced than we give them credit for today. And this is really what this show is about today. At some point in the past, and I have no idea how far back we have to go, there was something or some series of events which sparked the initial myth, the initial story, the initial need to transmit that particular information in this particular way across the ages. Okay? Sometimes we come across physical evidence in the form of stone. Sometimes we come across physical evidence in the form of bones. But sometimes we become across evidence in the form of the spoken and then later on written word. And we should not dismiss it just because it's not something we can't touch. I think it has as much value, Dave, as a rock or a bone that we find in the dust, because it has gone from mind to mind, sometimes with the help of meter, sometimes with the help of song, to ensure that the core message, the core intent, does not get lost. Right?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly true.
So, okay. I will tell you what we have next, or for next week, because we're coming toward the end. We have put together for you from a fantastic website, and it's forming part of the show notes, and we'll post it into the chat. This fantastic website has collated all the flood myths of the world. Okay. And not just that, but this is the one we focused on. And the reason we focused on the flood myths specifically is because that sort of set me on my way. I guess investigating these phenomena, and now the radio show to some extent, and my book, if I ever finish it. But also because this is the one myth that is prevalent in every single culture. I don't care where you go and how much contact has been there with that particular group of people. In fact, the less contact, the better. There will be a legend, a story, a myth, a folk tale of a flood. And not just a flood, but a flood of devastating effect. A flood that usually came about because we angered the gods, the sky people, the creators, each other, because we were fighting, because we were greedy, and in some myths, this is really amazing stuff, Dave, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the world was overpopulated. What?
That's right. Yes.
What? How does a tribe in the middle of nowhere even have a concept of overpopulation?
It's funny because they might be a tribe of 100 people.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, how many should we have?
102. No more. Okay. So, and it's just fascinating. And then some of these things are astonishing, and we will go into those things next week in detail. They talk about a time when people lived for a very long time. Okay. When the sky people came down and helped them with this, and they survived on a mountaintop, or they survived on a tall tree, or they survived in a canoe, or they survived in a iron house that God had to send down from heaven because the jealous people destroyed the boat that the dude was building on the instruction of the gods. That's one of them as well, believe it or not.
It's crazy.
It is insane.
Sorry
okay?
for everyone in the chat. I've been asked to say this. It's crazy the way it happens.
Okay, then. There is a Baktoon in here.
Baktoons.
Look, it's astonishing, guys, and we will go into these myths next week because it's the similarities, but also the differences which give this more credibility. They're not all in a boat. Some had rafts. Some actually went underground to survive. Some, climbed up on trees. And oddly enough, there's some themes which make no sense at all that run through these myths, like the snake theme. Okay? The snake is the savior, the crab. And then people turning to stone for various reasons, as punishment or, whatever. What does it have to do with the flood? But nonetheless, this is brought together by cultures that are so far apart from each other that modern scholars would deny them any contact at all in the past. Having said that, though, obviously there must have been some kind of contact, or in fact, we have an event that actually happened in the distant past and destroyed civilization as we know it. And of course, if you survive in an isolated area of the world, you think you're the only survivor. Because if there was a culture back then, thousands, tens of thousands of years ago, whatever, that was global in its reach, like ours is today, and then there was a huge catastrophic event which destroyed all communication, all travel, all contact between, different parts of the world, guess what? You must think that you're the only survivor in your particular corner of the world.
Exactly.
Right? Because generations will pass, maybe hundreds of years even, before you come in touch with another surviving community. Okay? In fact, they talk about the destruction of the first people, and the people that are populating the world today, and this is different cultures again, are a recent creation. They have recently been created rather than being the survivors from the flood. So maybe somewhere, some people survived, but maybe somewhere else, through some intervention or whatever, the earth was peopled with, I don't know, IVF babies? I don't know. But it's Dave, it's just the weirdest thing reading through this, I know we've got a couple more minutes, and I want to just share this one thing with you, which sort of blew me away. It really did.
Go on. Okay,
this is from the Selknam people. The Selknam people at the southern tip of Argentina, which is Fireland. Okay, Terra del Fuego. Okay, this is the legend, and there's also a reference I can give you. Brosca and Wilson. At one time, people didn't die. Instead, they just slept a while and woke up refreshed. After many lives, some got tired of being human and turned into rocks, clouds, animals, and such. A flood came which covered the world. People floundered around in the cold water. Some climbed onto ice floes and joined the penguins, playing and eating fish as the penguins did. In time, they turned into large penguins. When the water went down, some people went back to living as humans, but others stayed emperor penguins. Now, forget all the thing about the penguins to some extent, but the point is, at one time people didn't die.
That's the take home.
Instead, they just slept a while and woke up refreshed after many lives were out. But then there's a flood reference as well, okay? And you know, after the waters went down, people went back to living as humans. Of course, while the flood is there, you don't live as a human. You live underground on a boat or whatever.
Exactly.
This is from a people. I guarantee you, they were, you know, this has grown on their dung heap. Okay, there was no one that helped them with that. And there's and as I said, this is like 85 pages of stuff, you guys, and we're going to share that with you next week.
Next week's show is going to be jam packed. I want to say that the thing that we're talking about is just crazy. How they're all the same. So it really is. It's crazy. I can't believe when we started delving into this. It's one of those things that just it blows your mind how alike everything is.
Yeah.
And I like, because we did at show number 10, believe it or not, it was only show number 10. We did this, brought it all back together show and talked about it. And here we go. We're finding more stuff out that attaches to people can live forever.
Yeah.
Isn't that right?
Absolutely. And
that
you
was
know,
one of those things. It just came out again. Here we go. Here's another instance of it.
Yeah.
So take it.
No, look, you're right, Dave. I'm just blown away by this thing. And the thing is, there should be a degree you could study at university, which is called the Pan cultural degree, or whatever you want to call it, the Renaissance man and woman degree, where you bring knowledge from different areas or disciplines or different areas of science together to come up with a theory that covers everything. You know, ideally, and you need that because you can't work in isolation. You must look at everything and then form your theory from the available data as best as you can. But you cannot ignore data, and you cannot falsify data, and you cannot make the data be what you want it to be. Okay? If you've got a preconceived idea, that's okay. If you're willing to give that up when the data no longer agrees with that preconceived idea, like I said, Dave, right? We said this before. Tell us we're wrong. Write us letters, we're insane, we're crazy, and then tell us where we're wrong. Not just that we're wrong and that we can't take these people's words for it, or we shouldn't really focus on all these myths, they're just fairy tales, blah, blah, blah. Well, no, not really. They're not just fairy tales. They have survived for a reason. These tales, over generations. Why? Because they were held sacred or important or whatever.
They were certainly important enough to tell other people about and continue.
Yeah.
To continue these stories so that people could remember them over and over. They didn't have, for the most part, they didn't have pens, they didn't have paper, they didn't have, mass-produced what we've got today. And remember that one of the other take-home things is if there's a large flood coming, you get a chisel and a hammer and start writing it on some rock near you. It might be the only thing that will be left behind.
You're right, Dave. Absolutely. And even that, if it comes to a great freeze, you've mentioned this before, glaciers move across the land. Guess what? They're like a cheese grater. There's nothing left of the land. Okay? Whoosh!
That's one of the best descriptions I've ever heard. It really does. It grinds it all off at ground level.
And so much for our great works and the things that we're proud of. Nothing would be left. Go and see the movie Oblivion. It's a beautiful, beautifully crafted movie. In fact, do yourself a favor and watch Utopia, a British TV show, 6 parts. It's only 6 hours you're investing there. Watch it. Do yourself a favor. I'm astonished they would let that show be shown on TV. I was actually quite blown away. Look, we will try to give you some book and TV and movie reviews as we go forward. Usually, though, the shows are jam-packed, and if they're not jam-packed, then we have interviewees, which are jam-packed with information themselves. But look, we try, and then if you want any topics covered, let us know. Anything goes, of course. This is the shiny side out and the tinfoil hat zone.
It is, absolutely. And, if next week, if you're not wearing a tinfoil hat, well, and we don't actually promote wearing a tinfoil hat, but if you want to pretend you're wearing one, great. Remember, don't use a mobile phone while you've got your tinfoil hat on. We'd like to thank everyone once again for listening to the show. Thank you, even Nighthawk, who's in the chat room, station owner. There we go.
There goes the music.
You've been listening to another Shiny Side Out with Dave.
And Mackie.
We'll see you next week. Take care, everyone.